All right, recording now. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Roman, for being here as well. This webinar will talk about GraphQL. GraphQL is coming for Delphi, and today we are going to present to talk a little bit about what GraphQL is, what it is for, and we also show you a new framework. We have just released it, I think, last week, a couple of days ago. We have released GraphQL for Delphi. We're going to talk about it. So this is the subject now. Roman Yankovsky is here with me. He, for those who might not know him, he is very well known in the Delphi world, and he is the author of TMS FixInsight, which is a tool for static code analysis, and also the author of Delphi AST, open source library, which is a parser for Delphi Pascal source code. So you can be sure he's an expert with when it comes to language, and this is what GraphQL is, a language. Roman will explain about it. And it's also interesting that we have been talking, right, Roman, that the first commit of the GraphQL project was exactly on February 8th, 2 years ago. Roman did the first commit, and he started the project, and I was honored to be invited by him to help him in this project. So we worked together. It was a little bit delayed because we had lots of other tasks to do, but finally it's here, and we are going to talk about it. Roman, before we start, I want to run a poll here for you guys about what do you know, how to know this audience here, the people you are here, to know how much of you know about GraphQL and how much you intend, what's the plans for you to use GraphQL with Delphi. So take a moment to answer the poll, please. I will close it in a few seconds. This will give an idea, Roman, also to see if you go into details or more the basic stuff. Hey, hi, Kevin. Hi, Ivan. Nice to see you here. Hi, Mika. So this is are you seeing the results with me of the poll? Do you see, Roman, the results? Well, most people know.
Yeah, a lot of people have actually used it.
Okay, most people have never heard about GraphQL, but 1/3 already know about it a lot, just haven't used it yet. All right? Great. And maybe about half of people here do intend to use GraphQL with Delphi. Half of people said probably and for sure. Okay? So we have people eagering for knowledge here and also intending to use GraphQL. Okay, Roman, I'll let you give an introduction about GraphQL. I'll be back.
I'll try. Let me try. This is not going to be a deep introduction in GraphQL, just a quick overview for those who never work with this. In short, GraphQL is a query language for APIs, and GraphQL for Delphi library is a runtime for it that allows you to implement web servers using GraphQL. Let me. I'll try to compare GraphQL with REST because I'm sure that everyone had experience with REST. Let me share my screen. Okay. Why GraphQL is better than REST? REST has many round trips. In REST, you have many endpoints and many resources, and usually when you want to get some data, you do a lot of round trips to network, like first reading the record, then reading details about this record, and then reading something that's related to this record. This is very typical for the systems. Instead, GraphQL offers a single endpoint, and you may run multiple queries at once in the same endpoint. And in REST, you only get what actually server offers. You often over or are under fetching. You get more data than you need, or you get less data than you need, and you have to run more queries. And with GraphQL, you always get what you need. You request for typical fields, and you get it. This, for some extent, this may be compared with SQL. You write a query, and you get exactly what you actually requested for. REST basically doesn't have any type system, and GraphQL has a sophisticated type system. All GraphQL server is built around GraphQL schema that's written in GraphQL schema specification language. I think you'll see this later. Wagner will show this in the demo. REST is proposed to work with thin client and fast server when server offers a number of endpoints, and REST not doing any business logic around it, just use the endpoints. And GraphQL allows move more logic on client side because devices is getting more powerful and given more options. And this why GraphQL is better used for mobile applications, because you're getting more data in a single request, so doing less round trips to network. It works better with mobile connections. REST has poor discoverability. Basically, REST doesn't have any type systems or metadata. It's usually done by third-party tools like Swagger or written in some kind of documentation by us developers. And GraphQL has native support for discoverability and introspection based on GraphQL schema. You'll see this live a bit later. This is an example of GraphQL schema. It defines 3 types. Each have fields, which each has types. And just as an example, I show how schema evaluation works in GraphQL. You may add a directive deprecated to some field or add more fields to a type, and client will see that in the specification. Yes, this is in short this. And if you want to query this just you are sending a single post request to the endpoint and getting all users and comments and the details you need. For instance, if someone later will add a timestamp to type comment, this query will not return it because it's not requested. So it simplifies the evolution of type system. The client gets only what requested and never see new types and new stuff you add into the system. Yeah, if we go to this is a part of the demo Wagner will show you later, but I just want to show how the introspection works. This is GraphQL Playground. It is open source IDE for GraphQL. We use it in our project. And now we are connected to a local server running on Delphi for GraphQL library. And if you click Docs, we'll see all the details and what types it supports and what queries it supports and mutations. And this is all exposed to the front end, the clients, which is it is available natively out of the box. If you go to GraphQL.org, you'll see that basically it covers the weaknesses of REST. I have explained it. You are only getting fields you asked for, and you may get many sources in a single request. And you have a comprehensive type system, and you have tools to evolve. In short, that's it. Wagner, do you want anything to add, or?
Yeah. One thing, maybe you have more experience with GraphQL, so it's more natural to you. But one thing that was confusing for me when I started with GraphQL, maybe it's for you guys there also, is that GraphQL is not a library. It's not a library. It's not a tool. It's a language. That's what. Yeah,
it is.
That was most confusing at the beginning, because when some time ago when I started learning about GraphQL, I say, okay, where I download it, how do I use it? So actually, it is a language specification. So if you go to the specification of GraphQL, it doesn't mention any libraries. It doesn't mention, actually, it doesn't even mention HTTP or multi-tier applications. It's not about a client and a server per se. It's about a language. It's like you have JavaScript.
It is a query language, definitely. It may be, to some extent, it may be compared with SQL.
Exactly. Yes, because with SQL statements, you have some databases implementing SQL, supporting SQL statements.
Yes, and GraphQL is implementation agnostic. It only defines schema and query language.
Yeah, and what that language should return, right? So if you have a query like this, it has to return data like this. It have to. Your analogy is great. It's like, okay, in SQL, when you have select some field, then the server has to return the sum of all that records, all the fields of all the records. But it doesn't say anymore like that, anymore besides that. So that's what's GraphQL actually. And then you have the implementations. You have GraphQL for JavaScript. You have libraries that implement GraphQL itself. So I'll try to show the demo now. So maybe you get more concrete for you to understand and also see how GraphQL for Delphi works. But if you have questions here, let us know, especially because we are in two people here. So when one is talking, the other one can read the questions and maybe answer them.
I try to be sure to not go deep into GraphQL. Hope this was interesting.
Yeah, but then maybe people can ask questions. Why I'm talking here? People can ask questions in the chat, and maybe you can ask there. Or
there is a question about TMS Business Products.
Yeah, is GraphQL part of TMS Business Product? No, it's not. It's a separate product. There will be integration of GraphQL with TMS Business. Actually, it has been already developed to use TMS Sparkle as the engine for the HTTP. But we wanted to make it not strict to TMS Business because it's not REST, for example. It's something that people confuse. GraphQL is not REST. It's a language that can be served via HTTP. So the how do I say the English word? The couple with an HTTP library, it's very minimal. So you can use GraphQL from any HTTP framework from Delphi. In this example I'm showing here, I'm going to show it used with the web broker. Okay, let me try to share my screen here. My Delphi. Okay, you can see, right? So can you see the screen? Is it showing there?
It works for me.
Okay. So this is the demo GraphQL Hello Server, which is a GraphQL server using a Hello to implement a Hello World, the basic Hello World for a GraphQL server. So this is a web broker application, right? To start it, it's already built, but what we did was just came here, file, new, other, and Delphi, web, and we chose web server application. This is just a regular Delphi HTTP application. So you can choose Linux or Apache or standalone with Indy, etc. This is standalone server with Indy. And this first form here is was just created by the web broker wizard. The only thing we added here was this memo with some examples for queries, but all this start, stop, this is just regular web broker application created by the Delphi wizard. Okay, so what we have here specific for the GraphQL server is the web model, which was also created by the web broker wizard, but it was empty, of course. And then we have dropped two components here, which are actually for now the only components available in the framework, which is a GraphQL schema and a GraphQL web broker dispatcher. Okay, so this web broker dispatcher is just a bridge between it's the component that will serve GraphQL over HTTP using web broker. So in the future we might have other components like GraphQL Sparkle dispatcher, GraphQL Indy dispatcher, maybe, if that's interesting. For now, we think that web broker is enough. And even though there is no component, there are internal classes that you can use for serving HTTP with any framework. It's not visual here. So in this component here, we just have the endpoint. That's one difference from GraphQL servers from REST servers, for example. REST servers have lots of endpoints. You have /customers, /orders, /invoices, then you have get, put, post, etc. to perform all the operations you want to the server. In a HTTP GraphQL server, you have just one single endpoint. In this case, it's localhost 8080/GraphQL. And that's the endpoints that you are going to send GraphQL documents, queries to the server, and the server will process and return. Okay, so there is a single endpoint, and there are some options here that we can go into details later. But the main point here is to tell the server what is the schema that will be used, which is this component here. And the schema is like Roman's show it to you. It's a list of, it's a structure that holds everything that your server, your GraphQL server will provide. The types of your GraphQL, what's the word, of your GraphQL server, okay? So in this case here, I'm not sure if you can see there. Let me open the code editor here. We have one single type in our schema, which is the type query. And this type query, which is an object type, it can have many fields. We'll have a single field here, a field named hello, which is, you can interpret as a method, like a kind of object method. So it's a field hello, which receives one parameter, name, of type string, and this exclamation point here means that name is not null, is required. And this field here returns also a value of type string, okay? Also, one thing that I confused in the beginning is that GraphQL is a language that specifies two things, basically. It's the query that the client you will send to the server, or the query that will be executed. And there is also the document also written in GraphQL, which is this one, which is the type definition. Okay, this is not a query per se. I'm not querying anything. I'm not going to execute this document here, but it is a GraphQL document that specifies all the types available. Okay, so this is my schema: one object query with one field hello. And this is what I need. This is what the server needs to know what the GraphQL document is. There is only one missing thing here, which is with that specification, the GraphQL server and the client can do many things. I will show in a minute. But there is only one missing piece, is that how do I return values for that query, that hello? So this is where the binding comes and the field resolvers. The GraphQL has a concept of field resolvers. So if I go back here again, sorry. Again, we have this query here. We have to tell our application, the GraphQL library, how, if the client asks for the value of hello field, we have to tell the application how this hello field will be calculated, okay? So you have to provide a field resolver. That's the concept here. And this is how you do in this hello world application. We have this event here init schema, okay? This is the main event of schema, where the object will be passed to the event. And then we have to tell the schema how to resolve the fields. So in this case here, I'm using schema set resolver. So I'm telling that I'm going to define the resolver for the hello field of the query object, which you have specified in the document. Okay? So for the query type and the query type, the hello field, this is what will be executed to return the value of the hello field. So this is a very simple one. It's intuitive. The result will be a hello string concatenated with the value of the name argument passed by the client. Okay, this is our hello server application. So let's run it here. And an extra thing. Here in the web broker dispatcher, we have the option to enable playground. Okay, this is disabled by default because in production we will not use it, but we can enable playground so that if I open the server endpoint in the browser, so this localhost 88/GraphQL is the endpoint of my GraphQL server. But if I open it in the browser, it will automatically open the GraphQL playground ID. Okay. Now I can start running queries to my server. Actually, if I go to docs here, like Roman said, show it before, it shows me what's available in my server. So this is what's available here. We have a hello field, which receives a parameter name, and this is everything is provided to you by the server and by GraphQL Playground just from the schema that we have defined. Okay. So in this example here, I can copy and paste query. And if I execute, it doesn't work. What's happening here? I think server cannot be reached. Let me open again. I think I erased the here. Yeah. Somehow I messed with the browser local cache here. Yeah, if I create a new tab, it puts the server URL here. Okay. So history. Okay. Can you see what's written here?
I think it's interesting to mention that the query actually validated before it executed.
Sorry?
And
What did you say, Roman?
I mean, I think it's interesting to mention that the query is validated before it executes.
Oh, yeah.
If you do have wrong, you add new param that doesn't exist or something like that, it will not be executed. Like maybe you can try it.
Let me show that. But to start, this is a query. This is the GraphQL query that we execute. So we have to say, I want to do a query. And for that query, I want to return the hello, the value of the hello field. And since that hello field requires a named parameter, we pass it here. So if I change that to Wagner, for example, so the result will be hello Wagner. So what Roman is mentioning is, and this shows the value of using GraphQL. You have a tooling around GraphQL, all based on the fact that you are following the specification. So this GraphQL Playground IDE, for example, it's an open source IDE that relies on a server that follows the GraphQL specification. That means that the IDE, for example, has the server can validate the query. So like Roman was mentioned, for example, if I try to execute a query, you see, actually, I believe it didn't even hit the server here. This is a feature of GraphQL Playground IDE. It already tells me that there is an unknown argument named 2 on field. And actually, it's even smart enough to say, did you mean name? So somehow it kind of knows, gives a suggestion for you. And the same about types. For example, if I say name, I want to pass the parameter 123. String cannot represent a non-string value 123. Okay, so it's you have all this, and if I try to execute without the parameter, which is required, so you have client side field hello argument name of type string is required, but if you still hit the server, you also have that information that argument name is required, and the error is on line 2, column 3. Okay, so this is all. Let me open here for you. This is all thanks to the very strict GraphQL specification that everyone follows, all the tools. So you have the specification about the language, so how the language with the structure of the documents. You have a specification about all the types that are supported in GraphQL. So you have object types, you have interfaces, you have scalar types, of course, string, integers, and Boolean, and you have unions, enumerations, so all the types that you can have. GraphQL for Delphi supports all of them. You have a specification about introspection, which is meta information about the server. So that's how the playground, for example, knows what types the server has available. This is fulfilled by the feature, by the server that implements introspection. And then you have validation. That's what we are talking. There is a lot of validations that has to be executed. The document has to be checked about lots of specifications here to make sure that the query document is valid. Okay, and more of that you have, for example, if you have code completion. So I can see here, okay, the GraphQL server provides me mutation query. I want to create a query. So for example, suppose your client is trying to query your server with GraphQL. He'll type query, and then he wants to know, okay, what's available for me in that server? So in GraphQL, this is automatically because I can just use code completion, and I can see that I have a field named hello. And this one is for introspection, okay? So, okay, I have a field hello. Does it have parameters? Yes, it has one parameter, name of type string. So it's very easy to query. It's self-documenting. GraphQL, it's kind of self-documenting. Actually, let me open the second demo here so we can see more the query capabilities. So this is the bookshelf demo. It's just the same structure, but with different types. So let me try to query here without both of us know what's there. So I want to query what's available in the server for me. Okay, you have authors, book, and books. So okay, let's see what comes in authors. There is no field, and then for authors, I can have the ID of the author, the name of the author, and a list of books. Okay, let's just use ID and name. So if I query here, it shows me, okay, the query has no authors. So let's do some let's add some author here. So mutation. The difference from the query from mutation, it's what, as the name says, query only retrieves data from the server, and mutation alters data. So if you want to do something that will insert or post or delete or change data, you use mutations. What's available for me in mutations? I have create author and create book. So let's use create author. And it requires one parameter, name. So since I know it's a string, let's give a name. Leaf selection is not allowed because the create author will return something for me. So if you create the author and return the author, so from the author, I can ask him to return an ID and a name, for example. Okay. So it created an author, and the ID is 1 and the name is Leo. So if I come back here and query for authors, for example, and ask, okay, give me the ID and the name of the authors that you have in the server, then you have Leo. Okay. And this example of bookshelf here is interesting because I try to make it fast here, but it's interesting because it uses a different approach for the field resolvers. Which is, remember that, okay, my schema is here. So here we have our schema. Okay, we have the same event on init schema here, but then it's just calling init bookshelf schema. Let's see what's there. And this is a different approach. Instead of telling the field resolvers for each method, we are just binding the query type and the mutation type. Okay, I didn't show you the definitions here. Let me open here for you. Okay, it's here. So in this schema, we have the type. Let's go from the bottom here. The type query and the type mutation. Remember that you saw that. For type mutation, we have two fields, create author and create book. And for query, you have author, authors, book, and books. Okay, that's what you saw when I was using code completion. You saw that it was available from the server. And then, of course, we have two types here, since the query, for example, the query author returns the author type, which is a type, an object, with fields ID, name, and books. And the book has field ID, name, and author, okay? So we could set field resolvers for each and every field of every type here, but we can also use this bind mechanism. So we say, okay, bind the query from the schema to a T query in Delphi. So all we have to do is declare type T query and a type T mutation here with methods that has the same signature as the schema that we built, and then implement it here. So the field resolvers will be bound automatically. Okay, the same for the types. So I have here the type tbook and tauthor. So with ID and name, with matches, the properties and the types match the schema specification, and then everything is just automatic. For the implementation here, we are using in-memory list to hold the books and the authors. I can show you later if you are interested, if you have questions. But you imagine now that it's up to you, the implementation. You can hit the database or do whatever you want. All right. Roman, is there anything you want to add? Questions, guy? I can't believe you don't have questions. We will be very interested in knowing what your questions are.
There is a question about example with the database in chat, but I think you already answered that in bookshelf demo, because data source can be anything, right?
Yes. So for example, here is the, where is my, let me try to run it here with yeah, here. So for example, create author. Let me put a breakpoint here and copy and paste this. So let me create the author again. So I'm calling create author, is just executes this method here. We can see that the parameter is the one that I sent. And in this implementation here, I'm just creating a tauthor object, adding it to an internal list, and returning it here as the function result. That's it. But of course, you can execute a SQL statement. You can execute an Redis query and return an object here, an entity here. So it's up to you, the implementation of the server. Okay. What else? Rick is asking, is a language, but I assume there will be a server implementation supplied. So there you go. Yes. Roman answered that. Can you somehow query a subset of authors? Authors with a name starting with A. That will be up to you to create. Roman, correct me if I'm wrong, but that will be up to you to create your fields to support that, right?
Specification, but of course you may support pagination or filtering, but you have to do this yourself. Just adding parameters to your query and support the different resolvers.
Yeah. For example, here, authors, you can put some name here and specify. Note that even though in Delphi here you have the parameters, but in GraphQL the parameter is not required. You can set it as not required. So you can have lots of parameters here, but user is not required to fill all the parameters when querying. So you can specify which parameter you will use. It's possible to create CRUD operations automatically for our tables in a DB. Well, it's possible because everything is dynamic. You can set up field resolvers. but there is not yet a tool built in to do that. You have to write yourself. But what I would like to say is that this is just the beginning of the GraphQL for Delphi. It's not the end at all. And we are very proud of what we got so far, because we have followed the full specification. I believe there are footnote marks in the documentation mentioning that the only missing things are type extensions and subscriptions, which is a very side feature of GraphQL specification that we will cover in short time, in near future. But this is just the beginning. The idea here is that we add way more features, tools, integrations with databases, with TMS Business, with Aurelius, that we add more and more things here. That's just the beginning. How authentication and authorization handled? This is out of scope of GraphQL specification. So you have to, this is about HTTP, okay? So it's up to you to define authentication and authorization, and then you have ways to pass this to the field resolvers, and from the field resolvers, you can return the values based on that. Will this work with Delphi Professional? Yes, GraphQL for Delphi supports from Delphi 10 Seattle up to Delphi 11 Alexandria, and any SQ of Delphi is supported. Rick is asking, there seems to be a lot of similarities between GraphQL and REST. Queries loosely mapping to endpoints. Why would I use one versus the other? Roman Yankovsky.
I tried to cover this in the very beginning. Of course, there are similarities, but GraphQL gives some benefits. For instance, the schema that actually gives you strong typing and introspection, and also you may work with a single endpoint. You have less network round trips, which is important in mobile traffic, and you only fetch what the client actually need, because you may have different types of clients. Some clients may need author ID, or other clients may need author name, for instance, and they both don't need to query everything about this record, only pick the stuff they need in a single request. And it's easier to evolve this type of APIs, because it's a side effect of how it fetch data. If your client only fetch fields that it needs, then when you add new fields, it just works as usual. And you may add new types, and all clients will continue to work.
Yeah.
In short, that's it, I think.
And you forgot about versioning, right? Versioning is also interesting.
Yes, as I said, that I would call this versioning, but it's usually called evolution in GraphQL world. As I said, that if clients only query what they need and never get more, then when you add new fields, they will not even notice. And you may use directives to show that something deprecated, and the clients will know that this field is deprecated and maybe stop using it. In short, that's it, and I don't know what to add.
Yeah,
it's not a silver bullet, but it gives some benefits.
Actually, I have put a link to a blog post of mine, a post of my blog where I believe it's from 2 years ago, where I talk about this, the GraphQL from the perspective of a Delphi developer, and I talk about what I thought about GraphQL and how it compared to xData. I do a self-compliment here that Rick, for example, that asked the question, I believe he's a xData user. And there are lots of things that GraphQL brings that xData also brings to the REST server. But this is xData feature, is not REST feature. So for example, xData has a kind of introspection, which is the metadata of the server. So it provides that. It provides automatic endpoints from the... actually, in the article, I show many of the advantages of GraphQL and how it's covered by xData. So that's one. That's why sometimes if you use xData, you see, okay, GraphQL, I already have that with xData, but that's not the same for all REST servers. But still, if you use xData, GraphQL has its place with all the features that Roman said. I think the evolution is very interesting because when you have a REST server and you want to do a significant refactor of the server, of the REST server, you have to create a version 2 because it's very complicated to keep your clients working with your old server and with your new server, which might be different. And with GraphQL, this is minimized a lot. You keep the same server and you evolve that in the same server. And you also have the tooling. You saw that, for example, we don't have, even though with all the xData features, we don't have a web-based visual query builder for xData. All right, you have to write your filter, your queries. It has that nice feature, filter, ordering all that feature, but you have to write the query. So here with GraphQL, you have a web-based code completion and client-side validation for your query. It's not available in xData, just because we are following the GraphQL specification, and there is tooling for that, the GraphQL playground. And you will see that tooling in many other places. If you are using React, if you're using a web-based framework to build web applications, upcoming WebCore also, you see that there's lots of client-side GraphQL frameworks that might be easier to use than a REST client to build some web interfaces, for example. I must confess that I'm not even an expert in all the GraphQL tooling around. But if you look around, maybe you find some tooling that will be beneficial for you if you're using GraphQL, for example. Michael is talking about, I worked on quite a big REST server for a client, and as often nested queries are not possible or too difficult to implement, I really longed for a GraphQL implementation. Yeah. It's like ORM, actually. When I try to explain to someone what's the benefit, why use ORM or values, you have to use it to give an idea of, okay, this is bringing me advantages. This is bringing me productivity. With GraphQL, is the same. So you miss something when you start using it, and you'll be glad that the feature is there when you start using it. Can you change the schema on the fly? No. Actually, Bruno is asking that. Hi, Bruno. Maybe you are asking if you can change the schema at runtime. Yes, maybe I understand your question. You can, without having to recompile your application, you could stop the server or start a new one and create field resolvers dynamically. That is possible because the schema, let me open it here again. Of course, you'll not be able to use this approach here, which is create classes that binds to your schema, because you need to recompile your application. But for the hello world server, you can, because the schema definition is just a string that you can parse and recreate at runtime, and the field resolvers can also be set dynamically. So yes, in a way, you can define a schema and define the field resolvers all dynamically, so you can create a full GraphQL server at runtime, if that was your question. We will work also with VS Code WebCore. There is no WebCore client library for GraphQL yet. This is server side, so this is Delphi. It's not WebCore, it's not Pasture.js. But Bruno is here. Maybe he can mention about the plans for GraphQL with WebCore. Will there be a client component that can treat results like a data set? The client results are just JSON. It's JSON that you can use the regular Delphi or TMS Business features to convert it to a data set. In Delphi, there is a JSON to data set component and things like that. Actually, I was talking to Roman that one feature that we might implement, for example, is a class generator for a GraphQL server. So if you have a GraphQL server, we can maybe use introspection to create the class. The class types that represent the server. But note that in this example here, in the bookshelf example, we already have the classes. So for example, we have our server working here. From the client, from a Delphi client, we can ask the server the results. These will come as JSON. And we can reuse the same class, and you can deserialize that JSON to the class. This is not implemented specifically in the GraphQL library here. I'm just saying that you can use regular Delphi codes to do that. You have the class, you have the JSON. You could do that and use object dataset or Redis dataset to show the dataset. So the projections are done by the framework automatically. If pre-projections, you mean I want all the types and the fields, yes. So that's one point of GraphQL. I want to query all books, and for each book I want the ID and I want the name, but I don't want the release date. And for each book I want the author, but for the author I just want the name, I don't want the ID. So you can specify the structure of the results. How about performance of this implementation? Is there any data available? How many requests? We haven't done a specific load test because first the HTTP is not for GraphQL, so the HTTP part is the framework. So what we have here, let me open the documentation here. GraphQL-Delphi.com is the place for the documentation, okay? And so for you to have an idea of the classes, we have a class here named GraphQL Executor, okay? This is the class that you execute a query. You can make analogy to SQL statement executor. So it receives the document, the query that will be executed, and it has the schema, and that's it. So you just call this is low level, but execute this query for me and bring me the results. Everything is layered here. So you can have these results, the way you pass the query and the way you receive, you can use the web broker, for example, but you can re-implement it the way you want. So as I say, this is the beginning of GraphQL for Delphi, and we will sure evolve it and optimize it, and we want to hear your feedback. If I'm correct, this doesn't currently support HTTP-Sys. Fingers crossed there will be a Sparkle dispatcher soon. Yes. Actually, there is already a Sparkle dispatcher. We just didn't release it yet. So it will come soon. Roman is put a link for a nice feature, a nice tool there that is a schema visualization. Before you go to the final answering questions, let me put here data about, I'm getting lost here, wait a minute. Okay, I found it. Okay, this is the first link is the official GraphQL page at TMS Software. And the second one is the official documentation. And for this webinar attendants, we are offering a 30% coupon for discount for the registered version, valid until tomorrow. And GraphQL for Delphi is available on Get It. And there is no trial edition. There is a free edition that you can use. Just you cannot use for commercial use, but you can use for academic purpose, for learning, for maybe creating your own tool for personal use. You can use the free edition. And if you want to use for commercial applications, you can get a license from TMS Software. And there is a 30% coupon here for the attendants. And Roman and I will be here, and we'll be glad to answer the many more questions that you might have. No more questions, guy? Roman, do you want to do your final comments here? Rick is mentioning, it seems to me what I personally need is some GraphQL added to integrated with xData. Specifically, the ability to specify the fields they are returned. That's what GraphQL does. You can specify the fields that are returned. Bruno, what do you think about a coffee cup? Maybe for the attendance of the next TMS day, how do you say, in person, physical live event. Is it possible to realize a client login to the server? As I said, this is out of scope of GraphQL. This is not GraphQL, the client login, the authorization and authentication. This is up to the HTTP framework.
The GraphQL server is running behind web broker or Sparkle or any HTTP server, and login, authorization, authentication should be done there, not in GraphQL server.
So, Roman, do you know this Hazura tool? Nenad is asking about it.
Unfortunately, I don't. I'll take a look.
We'll take a look. Creates a GraphQL layer over a DB. That will be a kind of automatic CRUD endpoints.
This should be possible. We'll take a look.
Yeah, I have to take a look. I don't know about the tool. All right, Roman. Guys, we need your feedback. We need to.
Yeah, we need as much feedback as possible.
Yeah, this is the beginning. Actually, I want to say this. You know TMS. Many of you are long-time customers, supporters of TMS, and you might believe what this will be. This will be supported. This is already full-featured, and this will have a long and bright future. So I can say this: if you intend to use GraphQL in Delphi, this is the framework for you. This is the place, and it is already, and it will be the best GraphQL framework for Delphi. So that's what I want to say. But then what will drive it, the direction that this framework will be, will of course depend on the feedback on the requests for users. Actually, Bruno, I believe it's not created yet. We have to create a place in the TMS Support Center for the GraphQL for Delphi. So you can go there and ask questions and propose features. Download the free edition. It's free for everyone. Play with it, and let's see how it goes. We have plans for it. We have lots of plans for the next features, but now we need the feedback to know what we'll be implementing first. Great, it's in Support Center already. What limitations is on the free edition? No limitation. The only limitation, actually, there is no source code. Other than that, the only limitation is that you should not use for commercial use. That's it. But there is no technical limitation. It doesn't expire. It's not a encrypted version. So it's the same version. Automatic Aurelius entity integration. So yeah, we have to see if that's the path. Access to the source code of the samples from today. Actually, the samples that I have showed you here are the samples that are installed when you install GraphQL for Delphi. So yes, just download it from, it's available from Get also, but you can, let me open it here. I always get lost with this, too many windows. Here. Do you see my Delphi again? Okay. Here, it's available from Get. So if you go to Tools, Get, Package Manager, wait for it a little bit. Come on, Get. And type GraphQL. It's available from Get. You can just go there and install. You get GraphQL, you have the source code for the samples that I show you today, and you can run it and modify and play with it, okay? If you don't like Get, or if you don't use Delphi 11, you can go to the GraphQLDelphi.com, download, or you can go directly to the GraphQL for Delphi official page at tmssoftware.com. And download here, you have the downloads for the installer for up to Delphi 10 Seattle. And you can install it, have the source code there. Oh yes, if you are an all-access customer, it's already available for you. Go to the subscription manager and install from there. Grigory, yes, forget it, only CRUD Studio 11, but you can download the installer from the page that I mentioned here. All right, guys. Thank you, Wake, for coming here. Thank you, Anderson. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys, for being here. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was interesting information for you about GraphQL. And this is we are proud of what we have now. And GraphQL for Delphi will be a bright feature. And thank you for coming. Bye-bye.